Welcome to the verse-by-verse study of the book of Proverbs. We shall finish chapter 17 today, beginning with verse 11. Evildoers foster rebellion against God. The messenger of death will be sent against them. The word here in Hebrew for rebellion could also be translated hostile, to be against. Those that choose evil over good are against or hostile towards God and God's wisdom, God's principles. And unfortunately, that choice leads to personal destruction. Better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool bent on folly. During this time, travel was mostly on foot through winding wilderness trails. One thing you wanted to avoid was to abruptly, suddenly surprise a 10-foot mother bear that saw you as a threat to her cubs. The author is saying we should also have the same kind of concern to be careful, to be worried about the dangers associated with fools that are bent on engaging in folly. Again, fools are those that choose to reject God and His wisdom and behave without any moral restraint. For the fool, there is no guiding principles. There is no right or wrong, only what feels right, that is the most beneficial to them at the time. Folly here is that rejection of lack of restraint, uncontrolled anger, dishonesty, deceit, selfishness. Next, a warning. Evil will never leave the house of one who pays back evil for good. Here God is warning that those who choose to commit evil, especially against the innocent, will themselves live a life in a house of evil, meaning unrest, strife, a lack of peace. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. The term starting a quarrel means to intentionally start a verbal argument. A fool, again, is unrestrained. He uses his mouth to create a quarrel which is motivated not to try to solve some problem, but they just want to pick a fight. And that never ends well. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. These are two examples of injustice. They result when power influences justice. The foundational principle of our U.S. law is equal justice, no matter your position, no matter your power. That justice is to be blind to someone's status or power. This is a biblical-based godly principle. As we have in the next verse, it continues with the same theme. Why should fools have money in hand to buy wisdom when they are not able to understand it? The author is asking a rhetorical question, with the basic point being someone cannot buy godly wisdom with neither money nor power. True godly wisdom only comes by following Christ. Next, two beautiful definitions. A friend loves at all times, and a brother or sister is born for a time of adversity. The clear point is a true friend sticks with you in both good and bad times, as does a loyal brother or sister who will be there in your time of trouble. These are godly qualities. One who has no sense, shakes hands in pledge and puts up security or collateral for a neighbor. This is a repeated theme from chapter 6. We should be careful in making commitments. The term no sense means that there's no wisdom engaged before someone makes or agrees to commit to a financial obligation or any obligation. We are not to say yes to something until we first do our homework, including leaning on God's wisdom and direction in making that decision. Whoever loves a quarrel loves sin. Whoever builds a high gate invites destruction. So we have a repeat of verse 14. Those that initiate, are constantly engaged, that choose, that even love to quarrel, are choosing to sin. Sin means this the opposite of God's doing, the opposite of God's will. It's missing God's mark, the opposite of what is good for you. What is the fundamental motivation of someone that loves to quarrel? It's basically typically pride, which is noted in the second half of this verse. Building a high fancy gate implies, or attempting to be prideful, to build yourself up to simply to look good, is having a haughty spirit of pride. And God makes it clear, those that engage in pride will be humbled. And in the next verse, 20, there's two promises. One whose heart is corrupt does not prosper. One whose tongue is perverse falls into trouble. The old adage that crime does not pay is indeed godly wisdom, godly true. A corrupt or perverse heart will never be content, never be satisfied. And the mouth of the perverse hearts, always leads them into trouble. Next, a general statement about how our choices impact not only us, but also those that care about us. To have a fool for a child brings grief. There is no joy for the parent of a godless fool. It's interesting that in this short verse, the author uses the term fool twice, but they're different definition of fool. In the first is someone that is stubborn, refuses to listen, that chooses to be destructive in their path, self-destructive, and that will bring grief to their parents. The second fool is someone that actively is hostile, rejecting God and God's core values, and they're actively engaged in sin. Again, this robs the parents of joy. Another repeated promise. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. The author's point is that choosing God's path, choosing God's wisdom to live by God's principles is emotionally and physically healthy, as well as spiritually healthy. Various studies have shown that a person of faith literally, on average, has a longer lifespan. Next, the wicked accept bribes in secret to pervert the course of justice. Again, I repeat, a foundational godly principle for any effective society is equal justice. A discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. One of the many, many blessings of God's wisdom is this term discernment, which is not only God's capacity to recognize right from wrong, it's also having the discipline, the structure, the vision to continue to focus on what is important, as opposed to the fool that is in a constant pursuit of prideful vanity. And they lose sight of the important things like family and loyalty and compassion and honesty. Next, we have a foolish son brings grief to his father and bitterness to the mother who bore him. Again, we see that a fool brings headache and heartache to both mom and dad. And the next verse is a repeated theme about this issue of justice. If imposing a fine on the innocent is not good, surely to flog honest officials is not right. Here we have a reference to the powerful. The powerful often penalize the innocent and even the non-corrupt official for simply telling an uncomfortable truth, for not saying the party line, not compromising their values. So next we have an example of two characteristics of godly wisdom, someone that's walking in godly wisdom. Verse 27. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even tempered. That person of God, is careful in their speech and slow to anger, and tries to be even tempered in all situations. Lastly, we'll close with even a fool can occasionally look or appear wise. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. and discerning if they hold their tongues. Abraham Lincoln had it right. Silence can be a benefit to both the fool and to the wise, but the fools have a difficult time in remaining quiet. Their unrestraint compels them to want to just air their opinions on any subject. But a truly godly person knows when to be silent. Well, that closes chapter 17. Next week, chapter 18. Until then, may God bless you and bless your family with both grace and peace. Aloha.